Hi everybody, it's been another busy week. Had the opportunity to visit with the Minnesota Transportation Alliance, engineers, local government folks, and other transportation advocates talking about infrastructure that were in town in Washington. Also had the chance to visit with some more students from Ave Maria Academy in Maple Grove. And now let's get to our questions. The first actually is an email from Karen in Plymouth. Karen writes in, Representative Paulson, I am writing for you to support legislation that will help America's banks better serve its customers, clients, and communities, your constituents, and in the process, create jobs and economic growth. If Washington does not address this problem of ill-fitting, counterproductive regulations, the people and communities that America's banks serve will pay the price. Please help America's banks serve its customers and your constituents by passing financial regulatory reform proposals. Karen, actually, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. A few years ago, as many know, the Dodd-Frank legislation was enacted into law, intended in the financial crisis to making sure we had new regulations on banks, large banks in particular, that helped create that financial crisis. The problem is, there was a lot of overreach, while well-intended. It's now hurt a lot of community banks, credit unions, small institutions that provide support, and the vast majority of loans that go from those institutions to small businesses. So, in other words, it's constricted capital and harmed our economy. To the point where we've literally lost one community bank or credit union each and every single day. This week in the House, we did pass legislation to provide new reforms, not only to provide reforms for freeing up capital with small institutions, but making sure that that overreach does not continue on small community banks, on credit unions, but does guarantee no taxpayer bailouts, and making sure we can impose new fraud regulations on Wall Street institutions because they do require important financial regulation. Next up is a phone call I received actually from a mother in Maple Grove. And this is a mother who shares this story. I am concerned about the availability of opioids medication that often leads to addiction. My son died of an opioid overdose this last January. We later learned that the substance he overdosed on was acrofentanil, an analog of the deadly drug fentanyl, which he was able to obtain online. Please work in Congress to make it illegal to obtain these dangerous drugs online and to address the opioid epidemic as a whole. Well, first, I want to share how sorry I am for the loss of your son. I actually did call this mother and have a personal conversation based on this experience so we could learn on appropriate reforms and measures that we can make sure this doesn't happen or impact other families. The tragedy is this is impacting families all across the country, in everyone's congressional district and in every one of our communities. The opioid epidemic is a real epidemic, to the point where now the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration estimates that in 2016 alone, close to 60,000 people died as a result of a drug overdose, with half of those being attributed to heroin or fentanyl. And although we passed bipartisan legislation just this last year that is saving lives, more can be done. We had a hearing in the Joint Economic Committee just yesterday, or this week, that makes sure that we also are focusing more attention on disrupting the supply lines, looking at the economic impacts of what the opioid crisis has meant. And so by interrupting and defecting those supply lines of these drug cartels, we'll be able to impose further reforms to help families across the country. I want to thank everyone who took the time to share your thoughts, your questions, your ideas. Continue to reach out anytime on Facebook, on Twitter, of course on Instagram. You can reach me anytime at paulson.house.gov. Have a great weekend and a great week.